I call Pini Hinari.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker, tupu Māori ora ki te whai au ki te ao maramati he wā Māori ora. Ka haere tonu ngā kōrero i te ata nei, a mo te āhuatanga o ngā take tiriti kei mua i te aroaro o te whare i tēnei wā. Nō reira, kei roto i taua kōrero ko ngā tangi tonu ki o tātou tini aitua. Nā e kua whakawaha nei tō tātou whare mo tērā kaumātua rongo nui ki roto i a tātou i ngā marama kua pahuri ake nei, arā ko Eru Thompson tēnā. I takoto ki runga i tōna marae, a Kawerau ki roto i te wāhi e kia nei ko ihu mātau, te ihu o Mataoho. Nō reire tangi tonu ki a rātou, nā rātou tēnei huarahi i takahia, tainua mai ki roto i tēnei taima, anā ko tātou tēnei e huitahi nei, te mahi nui kia kawea tonu i tō tātou kaupapa ki mua tonu i tēnei whare. Nō reira kātiake ngā mihi tonu ki a rātou, ngā mihi tonu ki a tātou. Ka oro a hau i ngā mihi ki tō tātou minita, the Honourable Minister Finlayson, moana mahi katoa ki te whakatutuki i tēnei āhuatanga i tēnei take tiriti kei mua i te whare i tēnei wā. Nō reira ka haere tonu ngā mihi ki aia, me ona āpiha katoa. Ka tiake ki a tātou katoa e huitahi nei, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. Mr. Speaker, in the previous bill I mentioned the link between the Hawke's Bay Regional Planning Committee bill and the Te Hiku bill. It should now be of no surprise to the House that it is only fitting that this bill be considered on the same morning as the Te Hiku bill. And why I say that, Mr. Speaker, is because ngai takoto genealogy comes from the waka moi kakara, which I mentioned in my last speech in the House, Mr. Speaker, and it just so happens that on board that waka was the tupuna we know as Kawerau. And of course, right now we are discussing the Kawerau Maki claim settlement bill. So I'm encouraged to know that all of these bills were considered on this one morning, and I'd like to thank the House for their patience on the matter. Mr. Speaker, to the bill. We are encouraged by the cultural and commercial redress in this bill. Te Waonui a Tiriwa o the Waitakere Ranges is a place of historical significance to Te Kawerau Maki, and in more recent times, the rest of Tāmaki Makaurau. And I point that out, Mr. Speaker, because we want to make sure that these types of taonga are for all people while acknowledging the special place and historical significance of these areas to Te Kawerau Maki. And I want to touch on briefly the Hillary Trail. It's legendary. If you come from Auckland, or certainly West Auckland, you'll know of the Hillary Trail. And the famous athlete of our past, Arthur Lydiard, who would run those hills and trained Olympic champions, namely Sir Peter Snell. So I wanted to say that, Mr. Speaker, so that I could point out the significance of this place to all of Tāmaki Makaurau and indeed the country, while still acknowledging its historical significance to Te Kawerau Maki. Mr. Speaker, it's already been mentioned in the House about the goodwill shown from all sides on this bill. The other tribes that are involved in Tāmaki Makaurau, Maru Tuahu, and of course Ngāti Whātua. It was fantastic to listen to their submissions in support of Te Kawerau Maki and their pursuit of settling treaty grievances. And that is important because I think what it does is it shows the willingness and goodwill to work together, and we'll see further on in the bill when it comes to particular points of contention where Te Kawerau Maki are able to sit down and discuss with the officers of the Office of Treaty Settlements and of course Ngāti Whātua, and that's to be commended. I mentioned the combined efforts. It's also important to acknowledge, and it's fantastic to have the member in the House at the moment, Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Maggie Barry, for the work that the Conservation Board and the Office of Treaty Settlements has done in this particular bill. There are sites of a lot of significance to, as I've already mentioned, to Te Kawerau Maki and indeed all of New Zealand. And it's all incorporated in this bill, and it's fantastic to see that cross ministerial responsibility working together for the betterment of Te Kawerau Maki and indeed all parties concerned. So I want to acknowledge her and of course Minister Finlayson on the matter. My colleague Calvin Davis and David Clendon spoke on the last bill about the importance of a name, and therefore the work with the Geographic Board to realise a long-held dream of Te Kawerau Maki to call the Waitakere Ranges by their proper name. And that needs to be noted, because what we do know in the Māori world, Mr. Speaker, is that when there is a personal connection like that, and Mr. Davis spoke recently about his genealogical link to Tōhe, which the 90 Mile Beach is named after, he feels a significant sense of responsibility and duty of care for a place like that. And so I applaud the Geographic Board and Te Kawerau Maki in changing the name of the Waitakere Ranges to Te Waonui Tiriwa. In the hope that, of course, like Mr. Davis and many of us in this House, we have that personal affinity and a duty of care and responsibility to such an important place. Mr. Speaker, I want to briefly touch on the right of first refusal issue, and it is an issue, and I do thank the Minister for his explanation. It certainly cleared up some of the questions I have, but there still remains internally some questions with regard to the right of first refusal, and I want the House to cast their mind back to the Ngāti Apa settlement, where the right of first refusal was only extended for 50 years, and now in this particular bill, Te Kawerau Maki, I note it's for 171 years. And I just, there possibly could be some further questions, but we look forward to exploring that as this bill progresses through the House. So from one grey area to a place of shifting sands. It's been mentioned in the House, the submission by the families out at who have property out at Te Hinga, and it's important to mention the submissions by the Bellamy, Lusk and Haru family. And I don't want to labour the point too much, but what I do want to point out, Mr. Speaker, and this is actually a congratulations to the Māori Affairs Select Committee for dealing with this particular incident. And the incident I refer to, Mr. Speaker, is at the time of the hearing of the submissions in Tāmaki Makaurau, the two parties, the families who made their submission, and of course Te Kawerau Maki and other tribal interest groups, were all sitting in the same room and didn't know that they were. And I want to point out that perhaps this is an oversight of officiating officers or an administration, but that is a concern because to make this settlement a robust one for all parties concerned, I would have thought that before those submissions had come to the Māori Affairs Select Committee, that at least those groups would have had the opportunity to meet. But I do want to congratulate the chair of the Māori Affairs Select Committee and this committee as a whole in the way they dealt with that. Finally, Mr. Speaker, in my last contribution to the House, I spoke about whakapapa or genealogy and how it's all important in the Māori world. My grandfather, Sir James Henare, used to say that without your whakapapa, you are nothing. And if you do not have tamariki or children, you are of no consequence. And while that may sound really harsh, if you've listened to my contribution about the importance of whakapapa, you'll see how it's relevant not only to yesteryear, but of course to today and the bills in front of the House. So, Mr. Speaker, sadly the framework of legislation, and this has been the case since the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, it forces us as Māori to limit our view of our ancestry. It forces us to pick one eponymous ancestor and group underneath that particular ancestor. And while I acknowledge that as a descendant of Rahiri, and in this case Te Kawerau Maki, they group under one eponymous ancestor, it's important to remember that the descendants of Kawerau, he had more children than just one. So I want to lay this challenge before this House, and indeed Te Kawerau Maki. to acknowledge all of the descendants of those people of Kawerau, and to make sure that all of the descendants of Te Kawerau Maki are looked after as the bill progresses through the House. Kia ora, Mr. Speaker.
Kia ora. I call Paul Foster